Welcome to KenzuGaming. Yesterday DLC3 has been released and with it new coalitions have been released as well. Today we will look at NORAD coalition. So what I have done here is first filled it up with American units, and now we're gonna have a look if there are some Canadian units which we could replace with them. So let's start at the logistics. In the logistics sections you have pretty much everything you need, and they seem to be carbon copies. If you have a look, there is not much to it, so you can pretty much choose anything you want here. It really depends on your personal preferences. So let's have a look at the infantry section. Now with the new patch, the US Marines 90 became very powerful. They have received a very powerful RPG, and that's why I have two of them. On top of that, I also still have my SMUF here. Before they were very powerful, but now, considering that a lot of units have 700-meter range with 2 high explosive power for these kind of guys, the fire support guys, maybe we'll not need them anymore. I also have Rifleman for a powerful Bradley, which has 25 AP power with its TOW 2. And I have some Stinger guys in Humvees. So let's have a look what kind of infantry we could choose from the Canadians. We have the Canadian Airborne. Now let's compare them to the Marines, because the Marines are the standard force in our deck right now. So what can we compare them to? Maybe the Canadian Airborne. The machine gun is the same, the rifle also the same, and Carl Gustav, let's compare Carl Gustav and the 84. Well, I think it's pretty clear that the Canadian Airborne is better, because the RPG has greater range, which is very important. The accuracy is greater, which is maybe offset by the rate of fire, which is lower, only 10, as compared to Marines, which are 20, and the AP power is 1 higher. Now, the reason why I would not choose Canadian Airborne is because I can still have my LVTP, which is very powerful because of its grenade launcher. So if you want to rely on this vehicle, if you think the LVTP helps you a lot in your battles, then you should stick with the US Marines. However, if you're fighting in the cities and the LVTP cannot help you much, then you might want to rely on the Canadian Airborne units. I personally would prefer to stick with the US Marines on this one. Now let's have a look. What is missing in our deck at this point? What we are missing are some ATGMs. Now the Canadians don't have any long range ATGMs, but what they do have is some 1000 meter range ATGM, namely this Eric's. You can have it either together with the Highlanders or with the Eric's team. Now let's have a look at both of them and analyze which one we want to have. So the difference is obvious. In the Eric's team we have also some high explosive power, so this could be some advantage. However, for Highlanders we have a greater team. The team has 10 men, it has a machine gun. So again, this is up to you to decide. For more staying power, I would recommend Highlanders 90. The transports which we can choose for Highlanders 90 are mostly helicopters. Do we have some other stuff? No, only helicopters. I would recommend to take this helicopter as a transport because it is the fastest transport and has the most hit points. But this one is also acceptable if you don't need to get somewhere fast. So what I'm going to do is get rid of the SMUF and get the Highlanders. Now we have greater range and we have more AP power. In fact, I would maybe even get rid of one of these Marines for some games and grab another one of these. So it really depends on you if you want to have more ATGMs or you think the US Marines are fine and you want to get more LVTP. Now what I have not mentioned for the Canadian Airborne units is that you can have a decent transport. You can see we have a lot of wheeled options. We have the Bison for 10 and also this one, Grizzly. Now if we compare it to the US Marine 90 transport options, in case we don't want to take the LVTP, then we don't have much to choose from. We have also some helicopters, but we do not have any fast ground forces. So if you want to get somewhere fast, then you should probably take the Canadian Airborne in a Bison or a Grizzly. Probably the Bison will be better because there's more armor. Good. So now our infantry is done. We can also have a look what other things there is to offer. We have the Javelin, which is not powerful enough. We have some Pioneers. I don't think these are necessary. We have some MAF, which are weaker than the SMAF. So this is pretty much it. The units which I recommend taking in this deck are Canadian Airborne or US Marines, depending on what you want to achieve. US Marines with the LVTP 7A1 seem to be more optimal for most situations, and the other ones are more situational. You should definitely take Stinger C because it's very powerful. Then I have some Riflemen. This is optional. It depends. It really depends what kind of maps you're playing. If you cannot use the TOW2 at all, then I recommend that you take a weaker Bradley, so you get more units, maybe even this one. If you're fighting mostly in forest and at short range, I recommend that you take this Bradley, and even though it doesn't have such a good ATGM, you're probably not going to be using it much anyway. So then I recommend you take these Riflemen because you get 16 of them. However, if you're fighting in open fields, then I recommend taking this Bradley. You get only 8, but at least the TOW2 can kill something. Let's continue to support section. Now in the support section, there are many options for you in terms of artillery and anti-air. If you have America, then you probably will have some chaparrals to fight against helicopters. I know that there are many who prefer taking the most expensive chaparrals. However, I find that 4 are not enough for my deck, especially in longer games, as they sometimes get killed. That's why I usually stick with these guys, because I get 6 of them. Their range is still decent, and even though the accuracy is not awesome, I can wield them in higher numbers. Already at the beginning of the game I probably spawn 4 of them, so they can even take down planes. If I had these guys at the beginning of the game, then most likely I would be able to afford only 2 or 3 of them. But with these, I can have 4, and I'm not spending much money here on that. Now regarding artillery, it really depends on you if you want to take the attackants or not. In any case, I recommend that in your American deck you take the Paladin, and as a second unit either attacks or the M196A2. Now let's have a look what kind of options we receive from the Canadians. What I forgot to mention is that the Patriots are still fine. I personally would take them, but if I take them, I would still leave a space for iHawk Pips 3, because I don't want to rely fully on Patriots to take down my planes, because sometimes accidents happen and they can die. If you lose one of them, then it's gonna be pretty hard to take down those pesky planes. So now let's have a look at the Canadians. What can the Canadians offer? Now we have the Centurion Marksman. This is a very good option if you want to replace your pivots with a different spag. It's very efficient, very powerful. However, the disadvantage is that you get only 8 of them. Wait, 8? That's actually really good. No, the disadvantage is that it's really slow. It has only 35 kilometers per hour, so you have to consider that. So let's have a look what kind of units could improve our current deck. The counterpart for the Chaparral is probably the Adats, and we're going to lock it and compare it to the Chaparral unit. We could compare it to this one, however this one has only 4 units while the Adats has 6. So maybe it's not such a good thing to compare these two, but let's do it anyway. The helicopter range is better for the Chaparral. The airplane range also slightly better for the Chaparral. It has 4 missiles which are ready to fire. The ADATS has, I believe, 8, but I'm not 100% sure. Maybe it has to reload after 4 missiles as well. But judging by the appearance of the ADATS, probably not, because we can see all the 8 tubes are here. Now let's continue our comparison to the Chaparral. The disadvantage of the Chaparral is that we get less units, and also that we do not have an ATGM which fires at 2800 meter range. This is a very good advantage, especially in open maps. However, from the perspective of total destruction games and longer games, where you think that you are not gonna take this 70-point Chaparral anyway, and you're gonna take the weaker one because you need to have more units, then it becomes pretty much clear that the ADATS is stronger, at least in my point of view, because on top of being able to kill tanks and having greater helicopter range, it also has slightly better accuracy. Of course, 5% isn't much, but all in all, I think taking one ADATS is better for your deck than a Chaparral, because it gives you more options, it gives you more possibilities, and this is why I'm gonna replace these two guys. But I have to say that you have to consider the price difference. The Chaparral is much cheaper than the ADATS, so for some people they will still prefer to take the Chaparral, especially in maps which have a lot of forests where you cannot use your ATGMs. So in that case, the Chaparral might be better. Let's have a look what other units we have here. We have artillery. However, this artillery is not as good as the Paladin. Theoretically, we could also take the Centurion Marksman in our deck. I'm not going to do it, but you can assume that this would be also not a bad unit to put inside. Let's go on to tanks. This is my setup for tanks. Again, very tank heavy. It is to be able to endure much more beating than other decks. So what can we get here? If we look at the Canadian tanks, we can see that they are only in a medium range. We can see some medium tanks here. We don't have any super tanks here, so there is nothing which can compete against those super heavy tanks. One of those tanks which are especially good is this Mexas tank. I would say that this is pretty much a counter to the Abrams, so we could theoretically replace the Abrams with Mexas. Now this again depends on your playstyle. If your playstyle is to push somewhere deep and then hold the line and not continue pushing, then it would be better to take the Mexas, because when it's hidden and it starts firing, it will dish out much more damage. However, if you plan to use your tanks to keep the momentum, to keep attacking, then for offensive purposes, the M1 IP Abrams is better for attacking, because with the greater armor of 17 compared to 14 of Mexas, it's better as a meat shield and can protect your super heavy tanks from beating. So I will change this, assuming that I want to play more defensively. For a more aggressive play, obviously I would stick with the Abrams. We also have some Centurions here, but I don't recommend taking them. If you think that this is too heavy for you, if you want to take some lighter tanks, then also this Leopard C2 is also not a bad tank, if you want something cheaper but still powerful. With 17 AP power and 65% accuracy, this is a very decent tank. So let me change this tank. Let's go over to Recon. Again, you can see I'm using two Recon infantries. I will be using them as units which will be pushing forward as additional infantry. You can see they're also in the cheapest transport possible, in trucks. This means that for not that much money I can get some very powerful unit which can kill all sorts of infantry, including Spetsnaz. This is why I've taken them. I have the longbow because it's very powerful, and I think you should have it in every deck which allows you to have it. I also have some Recon Cobra. Why? Because I'll send this Cobra in front of my longbow to prevent my longbow getting shot by something. Now if we look at the Canadian units, what kind of good Canadian units do we have here? The Coyote is a good unit because it's not too expensive and it can defend itself. It has a range of 1750 meters with its autocannon, so this is decent. I recommend taking it if you think that you need some fast transport, which is a recon. What other fast recons do we have which are a little bit armored, which can defend themselves? We could take the Bradley. This is a very good unit. I sometimes use it. You could be also using a car, but this is again very situational. It depends on your preferences, so I cannot tell you which unit to choose here. Now we have Pathfinders here as a different option. If we compare them to the Navy SEALs, then what can we see here? Obviously we're just gonna choose one of these guys. Let's have a look at the capabilities. The Navy SEALs are much better at killing infantry, and the Pathfinders excel at taking down some poorly armored vehicles. So they are able to do it better than Navy SEALs with their grenade launcher. However, all in all, I recommend that you take Navy SEALs anyway, because you already have a lot of units which can destroy vehicles. And the Pathfinder's RPG is not that good actually, so might as well stick with the Navy SEALs then. Other units which we can choose from are the Rece team. Oh, Reese? I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. Okay, let's just call them Reese. I'm sure it's wrong. Okay, so basically these guys, I definitely recommend you to take these guys. So I'm going to kick these guys out. We don't need so many Navy SEALs if we can have one of these guys. I love this sniper team because it can take out vehicles, and the sniper rifle, which has 1500 meter range, is pretty decent. I love it has AP power. This is the only sniper rifle in the game which has armor piercing power, as far as I know. I don't think there is a new one, but I could be wrong. So I recommend taking this unit. Let's have a look to vehicles. In the vehicle section, I recommend taking a Humvee TOW2 because it's not too expensive. It has a good missile, the TOW2, and other units which you could choose from the American side are either a Zippo, one of these two guys, a Combat, or a CEV. This one is especially good against dug-in infantry or shelling cities which you are attacking. However, if you look at the options which Canada provides, then you will notice you have a Chimera here. And I definitely recommend taking this unit. So let's kick out the CEV and take the Chimera. Why is it so good? Because it's a fairly cheap tank destroyer, 120. Well, it's not cheap, but it's cheap for what it does. It has 20 front armor and 19 AP power, so it's actually a very good vehicle. It's a very good tank destroyer. You should definitely have it on your deck. From the other options, we can see there is some TOW2 vehicle. Let's just compare it to the Humvee TOW. It has less missiles and it's not much cheaper, so you should probably stick with the Humvee TOW2. You also have the TUA, but this TUA is comparable to the ITV, I guess. Let's have a look. Yes, they're pretty much the same, just a different number of missiles. The reason why I don't take the ITV is because it's never gonna shoot its 12 missiles. It's gonna get destroyed much earlier than that, so I stick with this guy. I can buy more of them, and it worked well for me, so that's the reason why I stick with it. Now let's have a look at the helicopters which we can choose from. You should definitely take the Apache. Looking at the helicopters, I definitely recommend you to take an Apache. Then you should also take some weaker helicopter. It could be a Cobra, for example. I recommend taking this one, not a weaker option. And you also have the possibility of creating a very strong air defense network with your Super Cobras. Especially late game, you will have no problem buying multiple of them. So if you have a look at your support, options and decide that you maybe don't need so many ADATs, or maybe you don't even need these attacks or whatever. Then you might as well just come here and say, okay, I'm just taking these Super Cobras. You have 6 of them. If you buy 4 of them, that's an investment of roughly 480, which is quite a lot of money. But if you bought, let's say, 4 iHawk Peep, it would be also quite a big investment. But with these guys, even though they don't have many missiles, which are anti-air missiles, the advantage is that they can defend you really well, because with 3850 meter range against planes, you can defend pretty much against any kind of bombers approaching you, and at the same time, it's almost impossible for enemy air defense to take you down, because you're staying behind your lines. Now, if we look at the possibilities which the Canadians offer to us, it's this helicopter, and you should never take it. However, I have to admit that I like the appearance of these missiles on the helicopter, so I'm guilty of taking it sometimes. But you should not take it. It's very weak, it's very inaccurate. It's just fun to look at, but you should definitely not be taking it to a competitive match. Other options we have here are some rocket helicopters. Keep your hands away from them. They're not good. Let's go to the air section. This is my standard setup for air. Choosing from the American planes, you can choose the Eagle or the Block as your primary air superiority fighter. I recommend you take the Block because it has fire and forget missiles. So this is pretty much done. Then, as a seed option, some people prefer to take the Prowler because you get 2 of them. However, the disadvantage is that the Seed has shorter range than the Raven, and the Prowler has also slightly less ECM, 50. The Raven has 60, and the speed of the Prowler is much lower, 750 compared to 1000 of the Raven. Now, when I'm attacking with my Raven, I send it together with the Hornet combo. You can see here, if you send your Raven and the Hornet straight behind each other, then as the Raven detects enemy radar units, it starts firing its 2 missiles. Probably 2 missiles is not enough to take down all of their air defense units. However, the Hornet, which is right behind you, right behind the Raven, is gonna take out even more. This is why I'm using this combo. Now let's have a look what other units we could take for the Americans. We could take the Thunderbolt. Some people like to take it. I don't think it's a bad plane. It's also very useful in some games. Then there are other ones who like to take this Eagle. I'm very fond of this Eagle, I like it very much. But unfortunately I cannot choose all these units, right? And there should be some Nighthawk. Where is Nighthawk? Here it is. Also, this Nighthawk unit is very good, especially when you target enemy tanks. It's never gonna miss. Now let's have a look what the Canadians bring to the table. Only these units. Now let's have a look what Canada has to offer in terms of air superiority fighters. We have here only this Hornet. Oh, we have another Hornet here. Yeah, but this is the air superiority fighter. So if we compare this to our Block, we'll see that the Block has fire and forget missiles and the Hornet has only semi-active missiles. And on top of that it has less ECM, so we will forget about it. Do we get more of the planes? No. So it's already forgotten. The only advantage which I see in the Canadian air tab is this Hornet, which has 8 cluster bombs with 6 AP power. So if you're fond of cluster bombs, you might want to use it. It's really nice to bomb some forests with it, and you can even take down pretty heavy Soviet tanks. I personally prefer using the anti-tank missiles because they seem to be better at the job, since they can be fired at a much larger range and you're not risking your plane so much. Again, it depends on your preference. For some people this works really good. Then again, they are probably not sending it into areas which they might be afraid of air defense networks. The Hornet on the other hand is actually very good, because even if you know that the enemy has air defense network, you can weaken it slowly with the Hornet and you don't have to risk flying above infrared anti-air with this guy, since it fires its missiles from distance, unlike the Canadian Hornet. So let's have a look at our deck. Judging from the deck, we do not have actually many units which we can use. Of course, in the infantry tab it's really good that we have the Highlanders. Now our infantry tab is much more potent. In the support tab, if we have... oh, actually we have another 2 points to spend. Okay, let's buy another ADATS. Now with this option we have a very strong support tab. Now the 2800 meter range and 25 AP power of the ADATS is nothing to be ashamed of. In fact, I think it's one of the best units Canada has to offer. Judging from the tank section, there is not much we can get. The Maxas is probably only better for you if you're defending. In the case of attacking, you should take the M1 IP Abrams. Now let's have a look at the Raycon tab. The Rees, they're very useful. I recommend taking them. And in the vehicle section, you get a very strong buff with the Chimera. Now, if we take into account that we have lost 5 activations points for NORAD, but at the same time we can see that actually we're not lacking any kind of units. Therefore, I have to say that the NORAD is a pretty strong coalition to play for, even though it might not be as strong as the US force. In some cases, it can be actually stronger, especially if you have a good opportunity to use your ADATs and Highlanders.